At the time of my retirement, I was in charge of the FBI Los Angeles Division. We were responsible for most of Southern California, over 14 million people in my jurisdiction, at 16 offices, 700 plus personnel, $22.5 million budget. So, and in 1977, I was honored as the Outstanding Law Enforcement Officer of America by the AFL-CIO Metal Trades Council. This presents a problem for the boys. I call them the junior high boys, the shadow government, because I do have credibility. Brian Gumbel, on remember his old TV show, morning TV show? We were talking about Oklahoma City, the bombing. I made 2 trips to Oklahoma. I was so incensed. I was furious when that happened because I received a call from Michael. Michael and I have been, or buddy, he's one of my closest friends. He and John DeCamp and a few other people. Pat Shannon's one of my closest friends. And Michael was in prison at the time, and I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. He said, "Ted, that's my bomb." Not that he made that bomb, but Michael and his dad, Marshall, who was also CIA, had the Hercules Manufacturing Company in Silicon Valley, California. And Michael is the brains behind this bomb. He's brilliant, as I said a few moments ago when Pat was talking. And he says, "Ted, that's my bomb." He says, it was developed by Hercules, my dad's company and his company, and manufactured by Dyno Nobel out of Salt Lake City. So I said, now Michael's in prison, but I communicate with him. He can call me. My telephone number's on his list for telephone calls. And so I was so incensed over that because I knew that Michael worked for the agency, and I knew instinctively that had to be a government operation. I made 2 trips to Oklahoma myself, personally out of my pocket, and I investigated it. And I'm going to go more into detail later on in my lecture. And I prepared a 210-page report on Oklahoma City. And I've passed it out to everybody and his brother who will look at it. I'm talking about in the official capacity, FBI and the rest of them. Everybody's ignored me. So anyway, the Oklahoma City was obviously an inside job. But the reason I mentioned Oklahoma City at first is because I gave a copy of my report to Jim Nichols, Terry Nichols' brother. Terry and McVeigh are co-conspirators and defendants in the Oklahoma City bombing. And Jim was interviewed by Brian Gumbel on his TV show this particular morning. And Jim says, "Have you read Ted Gunderson's Oklahoma City report?" Which is very damaging to the government, by the way. And it is, I say it's available to you. And Gumbel says, "No, he's a conspiracy theorist." But I want to tell you right now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy realist. There is a conspiracy. And by the time we finish my lecture in an hour and 15, 20 minutes, I guarantee if there's any doubt in your mind, it will not be there afterwards. JFK, Jack F. Kennedy. Pat's talked about that, and I think Jim talked about it too. I have a video, a DVD, and I highly recommend you folks buy this video. By the way, my videos are so cheap. At one time, I was giving them away for $3.85 each, but it got to the place where I had to charge a little more, but I'm giving them away. If you look at my catalog, and I'll go into that in just a few minutes. But I have this video on Jack Kennedy, and there were 13 shots in Dealey Plaza that day. The parade route at the last minute was changed by a fellow named I.B. Hale. I.B. Hale was an FBI agent. He was a personal friend of J. Edgar Hoover's. And one of his relatives wrote to me and told me about this and pointed out that he had passed away very suspiciously. And when she examined his medicine, there was a bottle of medicine in his bathroom of pills of some sort of medicine, and there were two different sizes. She suspected that he was poisoned or caused a heart attack at least. So the boys, the junior high boys, get rid of everybody that's going to hurt them. Direct testimony. Okay? So I urge you folks to get that one. And I have another one, JFK Jr., No question about it. By the way, on Jack Sr., this video puts George Bush in Dealey Plaza at the time of the murders. Okay. And the JFK Jr. puts George Bush, the president we have today, unavailable for 3 days during that period. His own staff didn't know where he was. And JFK Jr. was murdered without any question. And if you get that video, you'll find it. You'll see it. It's in there. It's documented. And then we had Bobby. Bobby was murdered, obviously. There were 11 shots in the walls and the door. Saran's gun would only hold 8 bullets. Okay? Daryl Gates wrote a book about it. Well, he wrote a book, and the whole book wasn't about that, but that was in the book. And he was trying to explain away this bullet theory about all these extra bullets on the wall and so forth. And it's just like the magic bullet theory with Conley. Didn't make any sense. Daryl Gates was a cover-up specialist. Okay, I developed information about drugs being brought into Central California by boat, taken over to Tulare, California by truck, and then brought down to Los Angeles. I gave Daryl Gates, I knew Daryl Gates because I was in charge of the FBI, he was in charge of the LAPD. And I gave that information to Daryl Gates with a letter, told him, send somebody over to see me, I'll give you the information. Nobody ever bothered to come see me. And this has been the experience that I've had in dealing with various law enforcement agencies. I develop information, clear-cut violations, and I'm ignored. I take it into, I have developed information about a CIA child kidnapping ring. There are 91 Americans who disappear every hour. It is estimated between 85 and 90% are children. Now that's over 700,000 Americans disappear every year. But a lot of them are returned, of course. But I have documentation of a CIA child kidnapping ring. They go around in vans. They take runaway kids. They put them in a van. They take them off. And they use them for body parts or for sacrifice or for sex slaves, or some of them are adopted out around the world. Around the world. I have an informant. And I asked him, I said, what happens to these kids? He said he's attended 6 auctions where the children anywhere from 2 to 3 up to 21 years of age are placed on a stage with a number on a piece of paper tied around their neck, cord, and the people in the audience bid on that number. The kids sell for up to $50,000 each. Okay? And I said, how many kids were at these auctions? He said the fewest number at one was 6, and the most at another auction was 36. 36 times $50,000. That's a lot of money. I've developed other information. The auctions have taken place, to my knowledge, right now. Toronto, Canada, outside Las Vegas, Nevada. Houston, Texas. A barn outside Lincoln, Nebraska. And a place in Michigan. I have people writing to me continuously. Help me, help me, help me. Or furnishing me information. I get letters all the time. I'm a cult member. I want to get out. Where can I do? Where can I go? You talk about getting out, what we're going to do here. Okay. And I can't help them. I have so many letters I can't respond to them. And they don't dare go to law enforcement because law enforcement will turn them in. Our system has been infiltrated, top to bottom, by the Illuminati. And I'll go into that in just a few moments. So we covered Pearl Harbor, Jack Kennedy Jr., Bobby Kennedy, Waco, Koresh, went into town every week to buy groceries. They could have arrested him when he went into Waco. Instead, the BATF came out with tanks, military tanks, in violation of Posse Comitatus Act that was passed years ago, 100 years ago or more, that did not disallowed, as a matter of fact, the military to become involved in civilian matters. Ruby Ridge, Randy and Vicki Weaver. Vicki was murdered by Horiuchi, the FBI sharpshooter of Japanese heritage. They tried to indict him locally for murder, and the FBI, Louis Freeh, stepped in, director of the FBI at the time, and did not allow it to happen. Somebody tried to indict him at the federal level, and it didn't happen. I talked to Randy. I gave him some of my research on one occasion, and he's very distraught. He lost not only his wife, but his child. The World Trade Center car bombing. Now, I'm telling you these things. We're talking about dirty business. We're talking about conspiracies. We're talking about murder. By the way, McVeigh was recruited out of Special Forces. The government said, he flunked out. He didn't flunk out. He wrote a letter to his sister. And believe it or not, these guys make mistakes in the news every once in a while. And I've got a copy of that newspaper article that appeared in the Dallas Morning News. And in that article, he said in his letter to his sister, who, by the way, has changed her name and moved down to South Carolina, I think, or North Carolina, South Carolina, that he'd been recruited out of Special Forces to be trained as an assassin and to become involved in the CIA drug operation. So, okay, back to the conspiracy again. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but as I think of things, I'll fill in for it. October 28, 1993. Here's the article, right out of the New York Times. What this article states, this is a former 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, Iman Salam, S-A-L-E-M, was an FBI informant with the terrorists, World Trade Center bombing, February 26, 1993. And he was commissioned by the terrorists to put the bomb together. And he went to his FBI handler. This is in the article, by the way. And the handler said, he said, we're going to use a dummy bomb. The handler says, no, we're going to use a real bomb. The FBI, not only in advance, they were going to bomb the World Trade Center with the car bomb. They furnished the ingredients for the bomb through Salam. Now, the way this came out, it came out during the trial of the terrorist. Ahmad Yosef was the head terrorist. He's in jail now in Terminal Island, California. Is because Salam wore a body mark when he met with the terrorists at the FBI instruction. And he very wisely wore a body mark when he met with the FBI. It probably, undoubtedly saved him. I'm sure he made about 6 copies, okay, and passed them around. That's how this became known public. So the FBI was involved in the World Trade Center car bombing in 1993. Oklahoma City, April the 19th, 1995. That, by the way, April 19th, is a satanic holiday. Okay? Now, I passed out this flyer to everybody in the audience. If you didn't get one, I want you to come back to my table and get it. But in this catalog, the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I have a collage. The first page, it shows George Bush, the president. It shows Anton LaVey. It shows Russian leaders with Putin, a fellow meet with Putin. It shows the Spider-Man on TV. Your kids watch that, of course. And it shows the Bush daughter and Bush's wife, all given the satanic sign. Okay? Now this is hook 'em horns, okay, with 2 hands. The satanic sign is this with the left hand. And that's how they recognize each other. I pulled up alongside some guy in a hot car in L.A. the other day, when I was in L.A., and I was admiring this car. It really was a neat car, you know. I've always admired cars. I gave him the high sign like this, and I think he thought I was giving him the satanic sign. He gives me this back. So it's very common. It's very prevalent. By the way, there are about 4 million practicing Satanists in America today. If you project that figure, it's about 1.5% of the population. That's one hell of a lot of practicing Satanists. That's over 4 million practicing Satanists. This calendar that's in this booklet gives you the holidays and what they do. For example, April 19th, Oklahoma City. From April the 17th through April the 25th, they practice Good Friday, Day of Passion, Death of Christ, Blood, Human Sacrifice, male only. And then on the 8th, that's on the 17th. On the 18th, Easter Eve day, blood, human sacrifice, male or female. That's why there's 50 to 60,000 humans sacrificed in this country every year. I get that from 3 different sources, too. And then April 21st, sacrificial preparation. 22nd, abduction holding. 23rd, ceremonial preparation of the individual up to the 25th. And April 26th is the grand climax. Oral, anal, vaginal, a female, 1 to 25, age 1 to 25. April 30th goes on, talks about blood, animal, and or human sacrifice, any age. Okay? These people meet in cellars. I know of cult members who, when they built their home, they built a sub-basement in their home deliberately so they can have their sacrifices. Do you remember the McMartin case in California? Child molestation case back in the 70s and 80s? Actually, in the 80s, I said. Well, the kids, there were 5,500 kids that went through that school over a period from 1966 until this situation was alleged to have occurred, the molestation of kids. The parents would drop the kids off there in the morning, go to work, come back at night, pick them up. And long story short, there were, some of the kids claimed that they were molested during that period. Kids said there were tunnels under the school. And the authorities went out there in 87 to look for the tunnels. Couldn't find any. I had an opportunity to gain, there was a trial, hung jury on Ray Buckey, the accused. And Virginia, the grandmother was acquitted. And they retried Ray Buckey in the second trial. I had an opportunity to take control of the property. And within 34 days, we hired an archaeologist. What happened is the family had given that to Danny Davis, the attorney who represented him in the trial. It was a 2-year trial. And he also got $15 million from the county. And Danny Davis had sold it to a contractor. This was after it was over in 1991. And I heard about it, so I went up to the contractor that owned the man that owned the property, and I said, let me get on that property. Hired an archaeologist from UCLA. Within 34 days, we documented that there had been tunnels under the school. The kids said they were taken through the tunnels, up into a trap door, the triplex next door, put in automobiles, and prostituted. 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old children. So we documented that there were tunnels under the school that had been filled in. I called the DA in the second trial. The DA refused to do anything about it. They sent an investigator out who wanted to argue with the archaeologists. But anyway, getting back to the Oklahoma City. As a result of Michael calling me that day, saying that's my bomb and so on and so forth, I started doing some research. And I have the Defense Daily, page 450, which is a magazine, and it lists the contract number for that particular bomb, the barometric bomb. And the official name is Electrohydrodynamic Gaseous Fuel Device Bomb. And the contract number is here, DAAA 21-90-C-0045, June 14th, 1990. I wrote to the Picatinny Arsenal people in Picatinny, New Jersey, and I said, I want the contract because this is public, available to the public. I get a letter back, this response to your Freedom of Information Act, blah, blah. After research and review of your request, please be advised there's no information pertaining to that particular contract. Now, recently, one of the individuals who bought the bought the report, wrote to Picatinny Arsenal a second time, and they said that going back that many years, the records have been destroyed. We can't tell you if there was or wasn't. Yeah. I wrote to Dyna Nobel. They're the ones that actually manufactured it. And I received no reply. I said, here's the contract number. I understand. I knew through Michael that you were the ones that manufactured this particular bomb. They never bothered to respond. I wrote to them on September 21st, 1995. The afternoon of April the 19th, there were 4 TV stations in Oklahoma City, all of which came forward and announced that there have found some unexploded bombs in the Murrah building. Every one of these, I have these clips, by the way. And one of the announcers even said, Now we're going to know where these bombs came from. One of them has U.S. Army stencil on it. Okay, I have those clips. I wrote to the FBI, and I gave them my report. And I highlighted the fact that there were some other bombs in the building that everybody seems to want to overlook. Never received a response. The same as with the kidnapping of the children. I put a report together called The Finders, which is the CIA name for the kidnapping organization out of Washington, D.C. It was exposed in 1987, partly because of the work that I did. And as a result of the work that I did, U.S. News and World Report put out an article on it. And they went out of business. They've relocated, I understand, through my informants, operating out of a church in Wichita, Kansas. So in this magazine, Firehouse Magazine, the article was written by the editor of the magazine. And he gave a timeline on Oklahoma City. Now, what actually happened, I believe, is General Parton and I were at odds. I kept saying this bomb exists. He said, I was involved in arsenal work in the late 70s, and there's no such bomb, and so on and so forth. What I think actually happened is the barometric bomb went off, and minutes later, or seconds, minute later, time later, the conventional bomb went off. And the other 4 bombs that were taken out of there were to have gone off at the same time, but there was a deflect of some sort. So that's why they took the 4 bombs out of the center Murrah building that didn't explode. Firehouse Magazine says, so we're looking at 5 explosives. You have the truck bomb, which is not a fertilizer bomb, by the way, of course, barometric bomb. You have another bomb that did go off, which matches the General Parton's theory. And then you had another unexploded bomb that came out of there at 10:22 in the morning, 10:45 in the morning. This is in Firehouse Magazine. And a 4th one came out at 13:51. Now, our illustrious president, by the way, I don't think we've had an honest president since Jack Kennedy. He was a womanizer, but I think he was an honest president. The reason they got rid of him, because he was going back on the gold standard, going to get rid of the Federal Reserve, he was going to revamp the CIA. And there's no question he was shot by and murdered by a combination of CIA and Sam Giancana's mafia bunch out of Chicago. Sam was to be testifying before Congress. 3 days before he was testifying, he was murdered. That tells you something, doesn't it? So our illustrious president, Bill Clinton, on June the 12th, 1995, I said 96 for Oklahoma City, it was 95, by the way, April 19th, 1995, gave a speech in Hanover, New Hampshire. He said the bomb that blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City was a, quote, miracle of technology. Fertilizer bomb is a miracle of technology. Okay. Continuing, Pat mentioned the affidavit that's been submitted by Terry Nichols. It's a 19-page affidavit filed U.S. District Court, Salt Lake City on February the 25th of 2007. And he names Larry Potts, number 2 man in the FBI, according to McVeigh, to him, to Nichols, as the person who coordinated Oklahoma City. That's very well documented. You didn't see that in the mainstream media, did you? No, of course not. So that brings us up to 911. I'm getting into the Patriot Act pretty soon, okay? So don't be bored with what I'm telling you. I'm laying the foundation like any good attorney's going to do, right? Now, Michael Riconosciuto developed a trap door that he put into a computer called the Promise software. The Promise software was developed by Nancy Bill Hamilton out of Washington, D.C. And what this computer does, it keeps track of everything. You can't believe what it keeps track of. And they're keeping track of us all here, by the way. I'm sure of that. I know that. And he leased it, the Hamiltons leased it to the Department of Justice for 2 years for, as I recall, $10 million. Well, during the period that the Department of Justice had the Promise software, Michael, being a brilliant scientist, put a trap door in it. And after the Department of Justice decided to keep it, a fellow named Earl Bryant, past president and owner of United Press International, took the Promise software and sold it around the world. Canadians, French, British, Israelis, and so forth. These other countries didn't know that we had a trapdoor in there that was developed by Mike Reconnaissance. So they're developing their intelligence information. We're stealing it from them. Rather ingenious idea. And the Brooks Committee, congressman from Texas, I don't know if he's still in office or not. Is he, Pat? I don't know. The Brooks Committee had a hearing on this. I think it was in Chicago. Maybe it was in Washington. I'm not sure. But they called Michael. They said, Michael, we want you to come back and testify about this trapdoor that you developed. And so Michael said, okay. He gave him an affidavit and so on and so forth. And he received a call, according to Michael, from a fellow named Peter Vietnix with the U.S. Department of Justice. And Vietnix says, don't you go back and testify. You'll be sorry. Michael said, shove off. I'm not paying attention to what you tell me to do or not do. And he testified. Within 3 weeks after testifying, Michael is arrested for drugs, first offense, sentenced to 30 years. I attended the trial. I testified at the trial, even sat at the attorney's table, and did everything I could to prevent this from happening. So Michael's in jail when 911 occurs. But now I'm going to go back to the spring of 1986. And I had a call from a fellow named Bill Sloan, who's head of HUD for the Western United States, who was appointed to this position by President Ronnie Reagan. So I'm trying to get in and see Michael. And I've been on his official visiting list as an official member of the defense team since 1991. And I've been visiting him regularly up until the year 2000, 2001, actually. And all of a sudden, I can't get in and see him. The Bureau of Prisons will not let me go in and see him. Well, now, going back again to the spring of '86, Bill Sloan calls me and says, Ted, can you help the Afghan rebels in their fight against the Soviets? I said, well, I don't know if I can or not, but I do know some people, and thinking of Mike Reconnaissance. I called Michael. He says, well, let's have a meeting. So we had a meeting at the Hilton Hotel at Ventura Boulevard in Sepulveda in Sherman Oaks. And the fellow from the State Department / CIA was there. I called him here a couple of years ago, and he said, I wasn't there. Don't ever use my name. So out of respect for him, I won't. Okay? And Michael was there. I was there. And the fourth person, a rather tall, slender fellow, was there. Tim Osman was his name. He was traveling under a Turkish passport. So the meeting lasted. We discussed. Michael, I'm not a technical man. I'm just an old gumshoe investigator, okay? I don't know anything about it. I have difficulty putting an extension cord in a wall socket, okay? So Michael and this fellow in the State Department talked. They did all the talking. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Left. I found out later that Michael and this Tim Osman visited 5 of our military bases. And as a result of Michael working with Tim Osman and the State Department representative, Michael was arranged to furnish the surface-to-air missiles that defeated the Soviets, shot down their helicopters. So it did help the Afghan rebels defeat the Soviets. Now, I also learned from Michael that our government then, at that time, as a result of that meeting, furnished the Afghan rebels $650 million a year for 5 years. I rather imagine that's money that they're probably using against us right today, our own money. But I point this out because as a result of the meeting with Osama bin Laden and Michael's other contacts, he's been around the world a few times. He developed sources inside the Arab world. And Michael had advanced knowledge about 911. Now, remember I just told you a few minutes ago I couldn't get in and see him in prison, right? No, I couldn't get in and see him. And I couldn't figure it out because I've been seeing him regularly. I visited him in South Carolina with Pat. I visited him in Massachusetts, at Devon. Visited him at White Deer in Pennsylvania. But I couldn't get in to see him. And I was back in Philadelphia for holidays because I was number 2 man in the FBI Philadelphia office. I'm back there visiting my kids. I have 3 boys there. By the way, one of them, there's been an attempt on one of my boys' lives, Ted Jr. But anyway, it was just a hop, skip, and a jump up the road to see Michael. Can't get in, couldn't get in. I finally got in to see Michael, January the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And then I realized why the Bureau of Prisons would not allow me to see Michael for about a year and a half. Michael couldn't communicate with me on the telephone because anybody that calls out on the prison system is recorded. So then, at that time when I'd finally dated in to see Michael, he said that on March the 20th, 2001, FBI agent Keith Kutry from the Williamsport, Pennsylvania resident agency, Mike was at White Deer, Pennsylvania, which is right down the road from Williamsport, came in to see him as a result of his attorney in Chicago, Lou Buffardi, writing to Colin Powell. Michael couldn't get the Bureau of Prisons to cooperate to get the FBI in or anybody in to talk about what he had, the information he had about terrorist activity forthcoming in the United States. Couldn't get anybody in the Bureau of Prisons. Couldn't get anybody in the system. Tried to contact the FBI. Everybody ignored him. But his attorney in Chicago wrote to Colin Powell. Powell apparently contacted the FBI and said, go see him. I don't think there's any question about it. Michael never would have talked to the FBI if it had been that letter to Colin Powell. So Keith Kutry comes into Michael, and at that time, March the 20th, 2001, 6 months prior to 9/11, Michael tells him who was coordinating forthcoming terrorist attacks in the United States, an electrical engineer out of Patterson, New Jersey, by the way, who has since gone back to Egypt, who had furnished information on the movement of Soviet-made shoulder-fired missiles in the United States. And we had 37 of these shoulder-fired missiles that came in through Canada. There was a 30-hour window when the FBI could have grabbed them after Keith Kutry interviewed Michael. They didn't. These shoulder-fired missiles have now been dispersed, brought in by 4 private airplanes, and they're scattered someplace in our country in hiding. Michael furnished him information about who was coordinating forthcoming skyjackings, who was coordinating bombings and espionage, and that he had informants who knew the identity of sleepers in the United States and overseas. You know what a sleeper is, folks? Anybody who doesn't know what a sleeper is? Okay, well, sleepers is somebody, they train you to be an espionage agent or a terrorist, and they say, go home and relax, we'll call on you when we're ready. And then they give you a call or you meet with them, and they say, okay, go out and blow this guy away or whatever the situation might be. And Michael also gave Agent Kutry information on the false identification ring in Montreal, Canada, and in New Jersey, and also the exact false IDs of 30 terrorists who had been chosen for action in the United States. Now, you remember the number 19? You remember the number 20? Right? There were 20, right? One of them was arrested on the 4 airplanes, right? Okay. There were 2 other planes that were to have been skyjacked. Those other 2 planes were supposed to go for the Statue of Liberty and for the Senate building, the Capitol building. And so there were supposed to have been 6 planes hijacked. But as you recall, after 9/11, FAA grounded immediately all the planes. And there was a plane in, I don't know where it was, I think New Jersey or New York. When everybody got off, they found box cutters under the seat. So Michael thought he had, in addition to this, furnished the exact ID of 30 terrorists, which would handle the 6 airplanes. He had an informant among the terrorists who was preparing false IDs for 4,500 terrorists around the world. 9/11 occurred. Mike thought he had done his job. Before that, when it occurred, he was shocked. 2 days later, FBI agent Keith Kutry, an attorney in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, interviewed this particular individual, Mike's informant that he furnished to them, threatened him with prosecution, and deported him and his family. Michael tells me he learned since then that the whole family's been executed. So, when Kutry came back to talk to Michael 2 days after 9/11, September 13th, Michael told me this. He was so excited and so upset, he was spitting at him and talking to him. He was so incensed over it. Michael, Kutry wanted to know why Michael was bothering the FBI and wasting its time. Accused Michael of seeking publicity, accused Michael of being an anti-FBI and anti-government, accused Michael, called him a conspiracy theorist, called him a know-it-all, a hoaxer, and threatened him with prosecution. At that point, Michael said, "That's enough. I'm not going to talk anymore unless you allow me to have an attorney with me." So there you have 911. Now you're saying to me, all right, Ted, anybody can say that Michael had this information. I have in front of me right here certified stamp from Michael Riconosciuto to Don Bailey, former congressman, U.S. congressman, no longer in office, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I have here in front of me a letter that went with that certified stamp dated February 6th. The letter's dated February 5, 2001. And in this letter, it's written in longhand, Michael says to Bailey, "Things have now come to a head. I now have contact with an operative that is an Arab group known as the Base, that's Al-Qaeda. They are presently engaged in preparation for a major attack in the United States. We have an insider to this group that handles false IDs and passports for the group's operation. I also have contact with one of my parties that supplies explosive materials to the group," so on and so forth. Last page of the letter. As soon as we learned that an actual attack was in the works, we realized we can't fool around with this. On the other hand, we don't want to get screwed by the government. That's the understatement of the day, of course. They're good at screwing us. So Michael gives me this information. January 3rd, 4th, and 5th, spent 3 days with him, 3 whole days with him. I wrote up this report. This report's available to you, by the way, through my website, tedgunderson.com. And what do? I go to Washington, D.C. Take this report. I spend 3 weeks in Washington, D.C. That was not an inexpensive trip, by the way. You ever stay in Washington for 3 weeks, you're in trouble if you don't have a few bucks. I didn't have the money, so I slept at on top of some of cardboard, not cardboard, but plywood on top of some the upside-down plastic mail containers with a makeshift mattress there. I slept on that in the American Free Press office, by the way, for 3 weeks. And I passed out my report to more than 150 congressmen and senators. I have in front of me right now a letter to Mr. Lee Hamilton, dated January 29, 2003. Michael, what I did is I referenced my interviews with Michael January 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I told him who Michael was in this letter without going in a lot of detail. And I told him the information he had. I gave Lee Hamilton, co-chairman of the President's Commission to investigate 911. I gave Hamilton my report, in addition to passing it out to 155 congressmen and senators, and asked the committee to debrief Michael as soon as possible. The last I heard from the President's Commission, Michael was never debriefed, and nothing ever came of that. There's no mention of that in the President's, in the President's Commission to investigate 911 report. Now, here's a list of people and agencies that I gave my report to. I gave it to the three sisters. You know who the three sisters are? Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times. And, of course, nothing ever came of that. You remember this girl, this FBI attorney in Minneapolis who came forward with a memo, and they chastised her, and she was demoted, and I don't know what all happened to her. Told her to keep her mouth shut. Appeared in Time magazine. Well, I looked up the Associated Press reporter who took that information and reported it. And I called him on the phone, specifically. And I told him I had this information. I sent him a copy of my report. 2 weeks later, I called him. I said, "You going to report it or not?" He said, "No, not." I said, "Why not?" He said, "It's too hot. It's too hot." Here's some of the agencies: Drug Enforcement, FBI, BATF, Secret Service, LAPD, San Bernardino Sheriff's Office, National Terrorist Hotline, and all the congressmen and so forth, Associated Press, Philippines Consulate. I gave it to everybody and his brother. British Consulate Division, Scotland Yard, I gave it to everybody. Nothing ever came of it. Now, if you look back, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the fact that bin Laden met with CIA agents in Dubai, July 4th through the 14th. We discussed the interview of Mr. Kennedy, Tom Kennedy, member of the Federal Emergency Management, who said that they arrived there the first on the scene Monday night. The terrorist attack took place on Tuesday morning. Congressman Kurt Weldon's book, quote, Countdown to Terrorism, cites 10 cities, based on information he has, that are targeted for bombs in the future. Those are Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Valdez, Alaska, because of the oil coming out of Alaska, Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Miami, Chicago, and Houston. So, as a result of these terrorist acts, what has happened? The Patriot Act, Federal Emergency Management, right? That's what it's all about. That's what the terrorist acts are all about. To take away our constitutional rights and civil liberties. You know, no one in Congress read the Patriot Bill before it was signed and passed. Nobody. It was authored by one man, a fellow named Viet Dinh, D-I-N-H, who was born in communist Vietnam, was magna cum laude, Harvard University. By the way, I was magna cum laude at the University of Nebraska. That's about right, too. I didn't study. I don't know how I got the FBI. I was one of the youngest FBI agents in the history of the organization. I applied when I was 22 years old. You had to be 25. Dinh served as special counsel at the impeachment of the trial of Bill Clinton. 2001, when the Patriot Act was adopted, Dinh was with the U.S. Department of Justice, advising President Bush on constitutional matters. 5,000 people have been arrested pursuant to the Patriot Act. It states it is legal to arrest and detain individuals without the involvement of any attorney and without probable cause or the filing of formal charges. This is what's really going to shock you now, okay? The bill was switched in early morning hours to substitute a bill that was prepared by the executive branch. The original Patriot Act was drafted and agreed upon by both Republicans and Democrats in both the House and the Senate. At the very last minute, the bill was switched and substituted by Dinh's bill. President Bush had the substitute bill printed at 3:45 a.m., only hours before the House voted for it that same morning. Out of 435 representatives, not one person in Congress read the Patriot Act before voting in favor of the substitute bill. It was not the bill that was originally reviewed, approved, and adopted by 36 votes of Republicans and Democrats in the Judiciary Committee. It was a 300-plus page bill that had never been read or seen before. It was passed overwhelmingly by the House and the Senate and signed into law on October 26, 2001. There's 27 amendments to the Constitution. The bill outright destroyed all the amendments relating to our civil rights and protection of our freedom. The First Amendment, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Librarians were reported to have to report anybody who checked out certain books to the FBI. And if the librarian didn't do it, she could be arrested and prosecuted and go into jail. The Franklin cover-up was one of the books that was on that list. This is a book about child kidnapping and a book about taking kids from Omaha, Nebraska, flying them to D.C. for sex orgies with congressmen and senators and blackmailing them so they will vote for these bills. This book is not being carried in the chain stores, Borders, or the other stores at all. They won't carry it. John DeCamp has sold 180,000 copies of this. It's in demand. John had to publish it himself to get it out. So this is one of the books that was on that list. I had a letter from an individual in Oregon who gave me that information. Checked out this book, and he noticed that the library made a special note of it. Made some inquiries on it. They denied it, but it's very obvious that's the case. And I mentioned the First Amendment. This requires librarians to turn over not only records about books, but also about Internet records. And as I said, there's a penalty of prison for the librarian who does not comply with this act. Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. People to be secure in their homes, houses, and papers' effects. The act allows the illegal search of your home and property while no one is at home without your knowledge or consent. Without a search warrant or probable cause, law enforcement officers can secretly enter your home for the purpose of collecting computer files and reading lists, video, magazine collections, and any other information about that person. Of course, this puts you out of business. If you're in business, they grab your computer, and then you don't have any money to defend yourself. I have to tell you this. My home, every place I've lived since I became involved in these issues, which was 1980. I first became involved in the movement in 1980. Every one of my homes has been invaded by these people. My home is like Grand Central Station to these people. Okay? Not only that, and I'm serious. I mean, I've had them come in when I'm not there. I've had them come in when I'm sleeping there. I went to bed one night at midnight in Las Vegas, had a condominium there. My bathrobe was at the foot of the bed. I had got up at 3 o'clock to go to the bathroom. And the bathroom had been laid out next to the bed like a rug, like in ceremonial fashion. Yeah, they come in. I finally was able to put a stop to it. I put special bolts on the doors and put a bar in the sliding glass door and all that sort of thing. And they didn't come in anymore, but it took me a while to figure this out. Not only that, not only have they been invading my home for years, we call them surreptitious entries. I've had about 18 to 20 people planted on me. One person after another after another. These people come to me, ask for help. I take them in, try to help them. I took one fellow in for a year. I took another fellow in for 7 months, thinking he's in the Patriot movement. Had no place to go. Stu Webb came to me. I need a place to stay for 4 days. Stayed 7 months. When he left, he stole a bunch of my research. I had 35 copies of Thanks for the Memories. And then next thing I know, I find out he's an FBI informant. And he's putting out disinformation on me. That's one of the techniques they've used to discredit me. And, for example, he says I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building. And that I've been married 5 times. I've only had one marriage. I've gone close a couple of times, but didn't work out, fortunately. Okay? I'm not marriage material. Okay? No one shall be punished without being duly convicted. And on July 21, 2005, both the House and the Senate voted to extend the Patriot Act. Now, you'd think by then they would have wised up, realized they hadn't read it in the first place, and they would have done something besides voting to extend it. It broadened its scope and made it most of the acts permanent. So it took 262 Republicans, 77 Democrats to outright kill the Bill of Rights. Now, are you familiar with executive orders? Anybody who's not familiar, raise your hand. Well, okay, executive orders were designed years and years ago for instructions to departmental heads within the government. The presidents have taken advantage of it and signed executive orders against us, those of us who are walking the streets. There are a number of executive orders in place today. So with the combination of the Patriot Act and these executive orders, we are now living in a fascist government. This is Nazi Germany reborn. Executive Order 11990, take over all forms of transportation, control highways and seaways. Another executive order. Seize all communications, media, telecommunications, internet, radio, and television. Another executive order. Take over all electric power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. Another one. Seize all means of transportation, including personal cars. Take over all local resources and farms. Executive Order 11000. Mobilize civilians into work brigades under government control. Executive Order 11001. take over all health, education, welfare. Postmaster General, another executive order, or operate national registration of person. They're going to register all of us. They're talking about ID now. Another executive order, take over airports, aircraft, including commercial airplanes. Relocate communities, build new housing designated to be abandoned. Take over railroad endways, waterways, public storage facilities. Take over all financial institutions. They're in the process of doing that now. Hurricane Katrina was a dress rehearsal, I believe. Police with guns drawn went into homes and confiscated guns. And then during Katrina, thousands of citizens were instructed to cross the bridge from New Orleans to Gretna, Louisiana, where buses would escort them out of the area. But Gretna Chief of Police Arthur Larson told his police officers to shoot at the people and force them back over the bridge to New Orleans. So first they took their guns away, and then they shot at them. They first took their guns, and then they shot at them. U.S. troops involved in Katrina violated the Posse Comitatus Act, not to use military against the civilians. This act was passed 100 years ago, June the 16th, 1878. Bush passed the John Warner National Defense Authorization Act on October 17, 2006. He slipped in at the last minute. The act destroys the Posse Comitatus Act. The law authorizes military police roundups and detention of protesters, detention of illegal aliens, potential terrorists, and other individuals. Here in Minneapolis or St. Paul, just last week or a couple of weeks ago, there was a bunch of kids, 200 and some young kids, sitting in a park. Police came in, arrested all of them. They have railroad cars. Gunderson Railroad out of Portland, Oregon. No relation, I hope. I have seen this car. Okay. I was driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. I lived in Las Vegas. I commuted a lot. Did a lot of work in L.A. And at Barstow, the road goes down under and over a railroad pass and then comes back up. As I started down, I saw my lights hit about 9:30 at night. This railroad car that was moving very slowly across the track. I'd seen pictures of it on the internet. I've talked to people who have seen the inside of these railroad cars. They're long aluminum benches on both sides, 3-tier. There's shackles at the ankle level all the way across. Recently, Congress had a closed-door session. I'll go into more detail on that in just a few minutes. But as a result of information leaked out of that session, there's an former LAPD police officer who has a contact in Washington. He said that that Congress was advised there are 1,000 detention camps in the United States. There are 500,000 caskets in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay. And just about 6 weeks ago, tanks from Camp Pendleton Marine Base in San Diego were out on Interstate 15 maneuvering at the exit and entries of the interstate. My source on that is a Marine, by the way. So we have signed a treaty with the Canadians. They call it the North American Army, where we can call upon the Canadian troops to come into America in the event of civil disorder. Bush signed into law the Military Commission Act 2006 on October 16, 2006. It passed Congress. All is necessary to arrest someone is to declare that person an enemy combatant and then deny that person the right to habeas corpus. This allows the president to secretly lock up and throw away the key. It allows the government to torture citizens with strobe lights, waterboarding, without due process. It protects the president by giving him immunity from prosecution to torture prisoners. 12 senators voted against habeas corpus. Representative Jane Harman, Democrat, California, introduced the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorist Prevention Act. Don't you love these names they give these acts, huh? Of 2007, which amends the Homeland Security Act of 2002. The act adds provision pertaining to the prevention of homegrown terrorism. It's centered on terrorism by individuals in the United States, targets the civilian population of the U.S., and makes having certain thoughts. If you have a thought, it's a crime. Floating around in your head may be contrary to the administration policy illegal, and the bill defines terrorism as the planned use or threat, use of force or violence by a group of individuals. Theoretically, under the Terrorist Act, Patriot Act, right now, they could come in here and arrest every one of us. Because you're listening to me, you have a thought that is contrary to that of the administration. The question is, who can define the use of a thought crime? Would it change from administration to administration? Would the people of this country be sentenced to death or merely to prison for criticizing the conduct of their leaders in Washington? Yes, they could be. It's a policy that's going to be made by them. The bill will strip every American of the freedom to have a thought. It destroys the freedom of speech, the First Amendment. H.R. 1955 sets the stage to outlaw any protest in the United States. It criminalizes the very thought itself of having a protest. It regulates the thoughts of people of the United States. The National Security Agency is the super sleuthing agency in the world. The NSA monitors millions of phone calls, electronic communications, and emails that run all the intercepts, and then run all the intercepts through a powerful computer and analyze the information. I can't begin to tell you how much trouble my associate and I have with our internets. The NSA has the world's most powerful computers, employs the top tier of computer scientists, advanced mathematicians, and has the best language experts in the world. They collect satellite and oral communications, compile massive databases, and analyze data, including internet traffic. The NSA shares information with U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA, FBI, and the Secret Service. All payphones in Grand Central Station in New York City are tapped. In 1978, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act was passed by Congress. It created a secret court. Only the government has the right to solicit these secret court proceedings. The judge has no discretion to deny the secret request, and the recipient of the court is barred from telling about the court orders. The government can get a secret warrant from a secret court in a secret building, which happens to be the top floor of the Justice Building in Washington, D.C., and then get all of your secrets, and you won't even know it. The government won't tell us how many employees work for NSA, but it's believed to be around 38,000. $43.5 billion per year is spent on intelligence. Major recipients, CIA, NSA, National Reconnaissance Office, which is responsible for satellites. The CIA and the NSA account for $10 billion each. NSA and FBI have teamed up with AT&T and Verizon to spy on U.S. citizens. President Bush has reauthorized a secret program of spying through telephone communication more than 30 times on Americans since 9/11. The New York Times in December 2005 stated that President Bush had authorized secret domestic spying and had bypassed the U.S. Congress in doing so. In the meantime, President Bush claims his secret program protects the rights of all Americans. A former AT&T technician has stated the U.S. government has tapped into the entire Internet system. The technician states the U.S. government is doing a huge domestic dragnet on everybody in the United States. Cell phones. The FBI can listen in, and they are listening, by the way, on your cell phone, even though you have it turned off. The Bush administration began spying on Americans 7 months prior to 9/11. The president authorized our intelligence agency to use database on every citizen in the United States 7 months prior to 9/11. Instead of admitting this, Bush claimed in a speech that the counterintelligence activities of the United States strictly targeted Al-Qaeda. Tuesday, March 12, 2001 session was only the fourth time in 176 years that Congress closed its doors to the public. Not only did members discuss new surveillance, but the imminent collapse of the U.S. economy that occurred September 2008, right now. It's happening now. And the imminent collapse of the U.S. federal government finances by February 2009. The possibility of civil war inside the United States as a result of the collapse, and advanced roundup of insurgent U.S. citizens, that's us, likely to move against the government. The detention of those rounded up by Rex 84 camps constructed throughout the United States, the possibility of retaliation against members of Congress for the collapse, the location of safe facilities for Congress, the merger of the United States with Canada for its natural resources and with Mexico for its cheap labor, the issuance of new currency, the Mero, for all three nations as a proposed solution to the coming economic Armageddon. Every president takes an oath of office. I took an oath of office, and I continue to support the Constitution. Okay. But this oath of office is to defend and support the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Here, some time ago, President Bush said, "What's the Constitution? It's just a goddamn piece of paper." Okay? Now, as a result of the Patriot Act, I wrote a letter to Attorney General Ashcroft, and it's a long letter. I put it on the Internet. I'm just going to read one paragraph from it. As a result of 9/11, we now have Homeland Security and the USA Patriot Act. The U.S. Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and who knows how many other alphabet agencies will be able to legally keep track of our credit cards, bank transactions, car rental receipts, gun purchases, passport applications, magazine subscriptions, medical prescriptions, academic grades, bank deposits, trips everybody books, events we attend, driver's license, toll bridge records, judicial and divorce records, rental car records, telephone records, interstate traffic, complaints by nosy neighbors to the FBI. It has been publicly announced that 1 in every 10 Americans are expected to become informants for the U.S. government. The Pentagon has developed an urban surveillance system that can track, record, and analyze the movement of every vehicle in a foreign city. In a foreign city. Ha ha. And what about searches of our neighbors and our property without search warrant? And randomly tap our phones and seize our property. How about this? Analyze the movement of every vehicle in a foreign city. I talked to a man in California at one of the conferences who told me that he was installing sensor devices in all the major highways in California, tied into your car. When you go over this particular highway, it keeps a record of where you are. Franklin cover-up. I had a call late 1980s. Now I'm telling you why, and Pat already touched on this. The Franklin cover-up out of Omaha, Nebraska. Driving kids to Sioux City, 184 miles, putting them in private jets, flying them to Washington, D.C. for sex orgies. That's how they get them, tell our congressmen how to vote. They frame them. I spent 2.5 months with a fellow named Rusty Nelson, who was the, quote, official photographer of this sex group. He was recruited out of Omaha, Nebraska. He would go down to the gay bars and take pictures of these people. I have nothing against gays, by the way. And then he was recruited out of there, and they asked him if he would like to go to work and so on and so forth. And Rusty was a farm kid from Nebraska. He had never been on a jet. And he saw the bright lights and all that and said, yeah, I'll take a shot at it. Well, they used Rusty as a official photographer to take these pictures of these congressmen and senators. They have meetings, and then certain groups after the meeting, some would go, they were kept overage, and they went upstairs. And they refer to the little boys as toys. Boys are toys. For some reason or other, these perverts preferred little boys, not little girls. Well, you know, John DeCamp, who wrote the Franklin cover-up book, was the first person in the United States to sue the Catholic Church for pedophilia, and the judge threw it out of court. Then along came these other cases. Now, Pat mentioned conspiracy of silence. Am I running out of time? Well, I got about another hour and a half to go. Is that all right? I'm telling you, I could talk for 6 hours, 10 hours. Okay, but I'm not. I'm going to cut it back real short, real soon, as soon as possible. But there's a couple of points I want to get across. Pat mentioned conspiracy of silence. That was a team from Yorkshire TV in England came over on the Franklin cover-up case with the crew. They spent 7 months here. And the show was to be aired on Discovery Channel on May the 3rd, 1994. It was actually written up in Discovery Channel, the TV guide. When certain members of Congress found out about it, they ordered all copies destroyed. Somebody bought up the rights anonymously, and it never aired. Now, it was listed in TV Guide. And I bought a copy of TV Guide about 4 years ago, and it's not listed there anymore. So I went to the newspaper in Los Angeles, and I had a friend of mine in Philadelphia go to the TV log section, and it's listed. So I got them, okay? I exposed them. But I've been selling, I've probably sold 200 or 300 of those. And I received a letter here about 2.5 years ago from a company in London, and they said, quit selling them or we're going to sue you. So I had to take them off the list. And that's a story about where Congress came in and bought the rights and ordered all copies destroyed. If you want a copy of that, just get one of my forms. These are the forms I have. Yeah, that's it, yeah. Get one of my forms, just write conspiracy silence on the back, and we'll get it out to you. But for the record, if somebody interviews you and tries to sue me, you're going to say, I gave it to you as a gift, okay? But I do appreciate a little donation on it, of course. When I first got out of the FBI, first major case was the Jeffrey McDonald case, triple murder out of Fort Bragg. Long story short, he was tried, convicted, sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. Green Beret, doctor, captain. He's still in prison today. I was hired by the defense team after he was convicted. Within 10 months, I had a signed confession from a girl named Alina Stoke, the girl in the floppy hat, if you know the case. There's been a book and 2 books and a movie on it. And Helena told me that he did not commit the murders. They were committed by her satanic cult group. I went public with the information. I was on national TV, radio. In fact, I was on Discovery Channel here a couple of weeks ago on that case. And people came from all parts of the country to me. I was like a sponge, a magnet. And that's where I got hooked. That's where, you seen that old ad about Ford has a better idea? That's when the lights went on for me. Since then, since I went public, I had 3 occasions when gunmen were waiting for me. I had my windows shot out in my apartment twice when I was standing near the window. The FBI has had 4 investigations of me. I found out through the Freedom of Information Act. And it's kind of funny because they won't give me anything of any significance. They just say, well, here's a page from this report. Here's another page from another report. No comprehensive reports. And I have to laugh because at the end of the reports, they say, Gunderson should be considered armed and dangerous. They should have put with knowledge after that. And then, most recently, I've been poisoned. I'm sitting in my condominium in Las Vegas. I realize I'm not thinking right. I can't put things together. And I'm suspicious. And I went down, had my blood pressure taken. I was 242 over 119. And I went down, this was a clue, of course. So I went down and had a blood test. I had arsenic and cyanide in me. And they were pumping poison. I could smell the sweet smell. Pumping poison into the condo from the condo next door. I don't know if they bought or rented the condo next door, but I never saw anybody coming or going. But I could smell the sweet smell. I smell it in my car every once in a while. And I had a lecture in Long Island, New York. And I parked my car, I drove back because I took this girl off the streets who was the ex-girlfriend of a leader of an Al-Qaeda terrorist cell in Los Angeles. Didn't know what to do with her, and I debriefed her for 4 hours. And by the way, that interview is available on my DVDs. Paul Bonassi's interview is available on my DVDs. Chip Tatum's interview is available. He's a former Black Ops operator for 25 years. And anyway, I took this girl back to Long Island. I had a lecture on Long Island. I took her back. She thought she had some friends to take care of her. And the car was in the parking lot at the Hilton Hotel for like 3 nights and 4 days. And I get in, and I notice this sweet smell, and I check the car out, and here's 2 needle marks between the door and the door jamb on the passenger side, and a half moon of dried liquid on the headliner. So anyway, that's how I, Dick Tracy, I figured, there's something wrong here. Okay? So anyway, I finally figured out with my blood pressure, they were giving me some kind of a gas that raised my blood pressure. And I tell this publicly because they're probably going to do it to a lot of us. And as a result of raising your blood pressure, you die of a stroke or heart attack. And then they say, oh, poor Ted, he died of a heart attack, or he died of a stroke, right? I have some great DVDs, some great buys in here. And they're cheap. They're not expensive. They're cheap. So anyway, wrap. It's a wrap, okay? But what I'm telling you is very important. By the way, this is a book, Why Johnny Can't Come Home, very important. Johnny was kidnapped by this group out of Omaha, the Illuminati, a group known as the Finders. This is the most important. I gave a lecture in Las Vegas here back in about 10 or 15 years, about 12 years ago. And I came off the podium, and this man handed me this book. He says, Mr. Gunderson, this is what it's all about. And I read it, and on page 27, it tells about the 25 goals that were announced by Adam Weishaupt, May the 1st, 1776, on how to take over the world. This is what it's all about. Control the press, corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, elect your own people to office. There's 25 goals that are set forth here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it. Yes. Man has a question. Yeah, that's Illuminati. That's why I brought this up. I didn't have time to go into it because I've only been talking for 3 hours. What? It's called Pawns in the Game. It's available through my catalog. All 3 of these books are available through my catalog. I'm sorry to take up so much of your time, your precious time.